Okay, let's get on with the lectures. This lecture we're going to be talking about how we can set up some initial basic rigs for our three objects we're going to be animating in a second, and we're going to go ahead and maybe animate a brick falling. I think I can fit that all in one little video, not keep it too long. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a brick. That's what we're going to animate first. So I'm just going to go in, get a cube, and just make a simple little brick. No big deal. Alright, that looks like a good brick to me. Shouldn't be too bad. Let me adjust my computer a little bit. Get it better. There we go. So we have this brick here. And what we need to do, we need to set up a simple little rig for it so we can animate this even better. So I'm going to go ahead and do a few things and follow closely step by step. Rigging is not a simple endeavor by any means, but hopefully I can shed some light on the subject. So with this brick here, I need to make sure all my values here are set to 0 in my channel box. We can find the channel box in this top right button right here. Just click it and it brings up my channel box with all my transformation values, translates, rotates, scales. It also has my layer editor right here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure all these values are 0. We can do that simply by going to Modify and resetting transformations. What you'll see is the brick going exactly to the center of the grid and everything zeroing out. So that's perfect right now. I'm going to bring up my outliner real quick. The outliner is going to be your best friend when you're making these little rigs for your characters, objects, whatever. Let's call this brick mesh 001. And what we're going to do is we're going to create like a hierarchy of different controls we can use to get this brick animating. We're not going to animate directly on the brick. We're going to create some handles here that we can really go in and start animating the brick with a lot of control. And we do this by creating curves. So I'm going to go to Create, NURBS Primitives, and I want to create, let's create a square. Okay, let's see if this works. I might have to go in and make it a circle. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to make a tool to get it moving in the correct, just to make a tool to make translations easier for us. Alright, I was afraid of this. What we have now is a bunch of lines that have come together. Let's see if we can't combine them somehow. Nope. Alright, let's delete that. I don't want to have to select a bunch of lines. So that's a lesson in maybe making squares not being the best thing for handles. I just want to create one curve. I don't have to worry about selecting different curves within. So that square wasn't the best. Let's just make a few circles. Alright, so I'm going to make a circle here, and I'm going to create it just around the base of my brick. Okay? And I'm going to call this curve translate. And let's call this like translate handle 001. So, how can we use this curve to move around my brick? Well, it's a pretty simple little trick. What we're going to do is we're going to create a hierarchy within our outliner right here, but I'm not going to move anything around yet. Let's go ahead and start making all the rest of my curves. So I'm going to go in here again, and we're just going to make 3 circles here. Let's make another circle, but this time let's make it in the vertical direction. And this will be our rotate handle. Rotate handle 001. Alright. So now we have 2 circles here. I'm going to make the translate one a little bit bigger. And you know what? I'm going to kind of squish it down just to tell a difference between these two right here. I don't want to be confused about which one's my translate and which one's my rotate. And I want to make yet again another little curve. So let's make another circle right here within our create NURBS primitives, if I can actually select it. And this time I'm going to make it going in this direction, facing us. And I'm going to make it really small. And this is going to be ultimately, let's make it kind of oblong. This is going to be my scale handle. 001. Alright, so we have all these curves in a brick. What the heck? Why? Well, I'll show us in a second, but we need to do a few things here to get this set up even more. I'm going to show us a little trick that's good for rigging. So if I look in my channel box again, remember this little button up here brings it up. Remember, I don't want to animate any keyframes on my brick. And I can set up a failsafe to make sure that I don't do that before I even start animating. What I'm going to do is I'm going to left click on translate and drag it all the way down to scale in my channel editor right here. So with all 9 values selected, I'm now going to right click on them and go to lock selected. Now I can't even move it. See how the handlebars are grayed out? I can't move it, scale it, or rotate it. But I can still make a keyframe on it. But with these little values set up right here, it'll ensure that if we try to select the brick to animate, it just won't work because we can't move it. So why would we keyframe that? So I'm just going to delete that keyframe on frame 1 I made. So if we can't move the brick, how are we going to get this thing to move? Well, like I said, we're going to create a hierarchy. And nesting these different curves within one another is going to be the key to this. So what we're going to do is we're going to middle mouse click and drag over our scale handle. So now in the scale, if I select my scale circle right here, I'll also have the brick selected. Look what happens when I scale these together. See, the brick scales with me. I don't have to worry about animating or scaling the brick directly. Okay. So just to make sure that my scale handle is set up correctly, I'm going to go ahead and freeze these channels right here as well. So freezing transformations is really good. Alright, so as you can see, after I did that, my circle now is at the regular shape, so let's fix that. Before I can really freeze that transformation, I'm showing you the mistakes you make so you don't have to do them again. Before we nest anything in our outliner, let's make sure that all our curves have their transformations frozen. So freezing transformations ensures that the shape of this curve and the position of this curve will remain the same while zeroing out our transformation channel right here. So if you look, freeze transformations, my scale curve remains oblong egg shaped while all my values are reset to their initial positions. So let's do the same for my rotate handle. Alright, this is how I'm going to rotate the brick. So let's freeze these transformations. So the circle stays the same, nothing's good, everything's zeroed out, and we'll freeze these transformations for the translate as well. So now we've effectively got ourselves set up a nice rig. Now we just need to put it into action. Alright, before I do that too, I'm going to go in and select this brick and make a layer for it because I don't want to be able to select this brick. So with our channel box open, I'm going to have this brick selected and I'm going to go to layers. I'm left clicking, I'm holding, and I'm selecting create layer from selected. So what this ultimately will do for us, and I'm going to name it brick lay. What this will do is allow us to lock out our brick. See, when this little square says R, that means it's locked, and I can't select it. I can only select my little curves here. So we're getting really close to setting up our rig. So what I'm going to do now, I showed you earlier, I'm going to middle mouse click and drag this brick. See how the little cursor turns to a plus sign? And I'm just going to hover over the scale handle and just nest it. See, now I have this little minus and plus box. I can see what's underneath it. It's like a folder system, like on your computer. So to ensure that I can only animate the scale of my curve, let's select translates and rotates in our channel box. So I left click and drag these blue bars down on them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to right click again and lock these as well. So the only thing I can do for this scale curve is scale it. So I press the move button, my arrows are locked out, I hit the rotate button, and my rotation handles are locked out. But yet if I select the curve and go to scale, I can still scale my brick. It scales the curve too, but that's okay. In a real animation, these curves won't be rendered, so it won't really matter what these curves look like. So what we're going to do now is we're going to nest the scale handle. So minimize our little hierarchy right here. We're going to nest scale into rotate. So now when I select my rotate handle, well, that's my translation. When I select my rotate, I didn't exactly put it on there. There we go. You got to make sure you get it good. So now I have my brick inside my scale and my scale inside my rotate. When I select my rotate, it rotates everything, even the curve scale handle right there. And same thing here. I'm going to lock out my channels I don't need, so I'm going to lock out translate. I'm going to select scale and lock these selected out as well. So now all I can do for my rotate handle is rotate it. One more step to go, and if you're keeping up, I bet you can guess what it is. We're going to nest our rotate handle under our translate handle. And yes, once again, we're going to go in here and select rotates and scale values and lock those as well. So now, whenever I have my brick, I can select my translate curve, this long one right here, to move it. Alright. I can select my rotate handle to rotate the brick. And I can select my scale. Let me get a good selection on that. I can select my scale curve just to scale it. And we're actually going to be animating these curves, okay? We're not going to be animating the brick itself. We don't need to, because anywhere this brick, these curves move to, the brick's going to follow right with them. So that's pretty smart. I'm going to go ahead and save this file out. I'm going to save it just on my desktop right here. Now's a good time to save. Be sure that you save it in Maya ASCII, and make sure that you give it a good file name like brick animate 001. I made it 001 to save iteratively, so I can come back to maybe 003 if things are messing up down the road, and I don't have to worry about losing any work. So now we have this brick. It's all good. We're all set up. Now I need to make a ground so I know what the brick's bouncing off of. Alright, so let's make a polygon primitive plane. Let's go to my top view. I press spacebar to go to my top view. I press spacebar. I'm in my top view now. Let's make it a pretty big ground. And that should do it right there. I'm going to reset these values to not O on the keyboard, but O on the number pad. And I'm going to create a layer for it as well. And I'm going to call this ground lay. So now I know I have some geometry that my brick can bounce on. Alright, so the only things I can select now are my curves. Alright, and I think we're pretty good here. Tell you what, this will make this video just about setting up the rig, okay? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hide this brick, and we're going to do the whole process again. Let me just hide it. We're going to do the whole process again now with a ball, okay? Just to go over it one more time. I'm going to go ahead and rig all three objects together. Okay, great. So I'm going to go to Polygon Primitives. I'm going to grab a nice sphere. That looks pretty good. And I'm going to make my little bouncy ball. Alright, so here's my ball. Pretty good looking ball. I like it a lot. So the first thing I'm going to do, step one, after making your mesh, well, step one is to name it. Ball mesh 001. And we'll call this ground mesh 001. Okay, great. And you know what? It's going to be hard to tell the difference between translate handle for the ball and translate handle for the brick in my outliner. So I'm going to go ahead and make another little layer to contain my whole rig and brick together. So I'm going to go to modify. I'm going to select my translate handle. Let's go ahead and show it back. So show selection. I'm going to go to modify, or is it edit, and group it. Alright, that makes a whole new group for us, okay? If we can see on my outliner, I have the group icon, 3 curves, and a brick. We can just call this brick rig 001. So with my brick rig 001, I now can tell the difference between my brick and my outliner, and vice versa. And I'm going to go back to this brick layer and just call this object lay. That way I can make a whole new layer for just my brick rig altogether, so I can just get it out of the way when I need to. So let's select my brick rig now, and let's just make a layer for it. Create a layer from selected, and let's call this brick. This is going to be the real brick lay, because now I can hide the whole brick layer, and I don't have to worry about locking out my curves. I can just lock out all the objects I want to. So my brick layer set up, everything's good. I got my ball mesh ready to rock and roll. Let's continue. So with my ball named, let's get into the second rig just to reinforce the idea. And I'll probably make the feather one too. Do that really quick. 3 times the charm, right? So let's freeze transformations. Remember, freezing transformations will keep the ball in place while zeroing out all my transformations right here. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and add that ball to my object layer. So now I can't select the ball. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and pull it up above the grid right here. Maybe get it right on the ground. So I'm going to go to a side view here. And there's my ball. I messed with the channel box again, so my translate Y has a new value. That's just a simple matter of freezing the transformations again. Actually, I reset them. So resetting transformations is not the same as freezing transformations. Resetting these transformations is like me going over to translate Y and pressing 0, and it basically says, okay, ball, move back down to the 0 point on this grid. That's not what I want. I want to keep my ball in the same position. So if I freeze transformations, remember, it keeps your object in the same place and size, but it still zeroes out your transformations right here. Alright, so I got my ball set up good. I'm ready to roll. So let's do the same thing here. Let's create some curves. So I go to NURBS, I create a circle. Let's create a circle looking down for my translate. Alright, I can go back in and tweak it. I'm going to set these at 0 just to make sure I'm centered around the ball, and I'm going to put it around the midpoint of the ball so you can eye it, and I'm going to scrunch it down, say okay, this is my translate handle because the oval looks like it's almost like a I'm going to look at it like an arrow saying go this way because it's skinny and it's pointing in a certain direction. Okay. It's not entirely encompassing the ball all the way. I want to make sure my handles are set up really nicely. Alright, so there we go. So with my NURB circle selected, let's call this translate handle 001 001. We're going to freeze transformations so everything's zeroed out nicely. And I'm just going to take a shortcut here. I'm just going to duplicate this curve again. Maybe spin it 90 degrees that way. Spin it 90 degrees this way, because I believe that's kind of how our first, rotation handle was set up on our brick. Oops. Maybe I can get my brick layer hidden. And I want to make sure that my rotate curve is pretty circular, because I want my rotate curve to be circular. So that's my rotate handle right there. I need to name it as such. So let's go back to translate, go back to our outliner and call this rotate handle, if I can spell today, 001. We're going to freeze transformations because we've done a lot of tweaking to this curve. So go to modify, freeze transformations, and let's make my scale handle real quick. Scale handle is going to be a little bit more tricky because I'm not going to be able to really differentiate it between the other curves, but we'll do the best I can because, you know, the ball's round. If I just make it a round ball, then meh. Alright, so we'll just have like the little scale handles peeking up right on the top of our ball here. That'll be a good tell. I'm actually going to make my rotate handle a little bit bigger so I can select that scale when I need it. So with my rotate handle tweaked again, let's freeze those transformations. Let's freeze our new scale handles transformations. I'm going to freeze them right now. And now we can start doing that whole hierarchy thing. So remember, put your object that you want to animate into scale. Okay? And it's very important that you do it in the same hierarchy as I am. You want scale to be the last thing that you animate closest to the ball. There's a reason for this. So I'm going to nest scale into rotate and rotate into translate. So now I have a nice little curve or a rig set up right here. And I'm going to select my translate handle, my very top of my tier here. And I'm going to go ahead and go to edit and group it all together and call this ball rig 001. And let's give my ball rig 001 its own layer. So there's layer 1. Let's call this ball lay. Now I can hide my ball layer. It's supposed to be hidden. There we go. I just had to add it to that layer. Alright, so let's make a feather or a leaf. Depending on what you want to do, you can do a leaf or a feather. And this isn't a modeling class, so I'm not going to spend too much time modeling out something. Let's just take a cube and let's model out a basic feather. So kind of have it long, flat though. Make it a little bit bigger so we can see it easier. I'm going to hover it right above the ground a little bit. Yeah, make it flat. And let's add some edge loops in here to get the shape of a leaf. So I'm going to go back to Polygons menu, insert edge loop. Let's make one right there. Let's make one right here. Right here. Let's see if we can get a leaf shape out of this. So this is going to be the base. So let's make this kind of roundish. Not too round though. I'm going to pull out this vert right here to be the tip of my feather. If I can select these handles. Let's bring them in. Wow, that's a pretty good feather if you ask me. Alright, so there's my awesome feather. Okay, cool. I'm just going to go with it. You know, that looks almost like a leaf too, whatever. It's a light floating object, whatever you want to call it. Alright, so with my feather made, let's call it just a feather. Mesh 001. I'm pretty particular about naming stuff. It keeps your Myocenes working nice and easy. Alright, so with my object made, I'm going to go through this a little bit faster. We freeze transformations once more. Alright. I'm going to make a curve. So let's do circle. Let's do that. I like to have my translate handles looking kind of like a, I don't know, really narrow. Just make it a little bit longer. So there's my translate curve. I'm going to position it right in the middle of that feather. Alright. I'm going to duplicate it, spin it up 90 degrees on that, spin it around 90 degrees on that. Just going to double check and make sure that my, oh nope, it was the other one. I think I had it going this way, right? So 180. Have it going down like that, and this is my rotate. So I'm going to make this a circle again, and I'm really going to scale this guy up. Right there. Maybe scale this out. I want to set up my handles so I can select them as easily as possible. I don't want to have to be clicking all around, clicking the wrong curves. It'll make life a pain. And let's duplicate this once more. Let's get my nice curve for my scale, and we'll make it like we have been, kind of narrow, like peeking in the middle right here. That way I'll know that's my scale. So what we need to do now is we need to go and name them in freeze transformations. So here's my first NURB circle. Freeze transformations, translate handle 001. Select my rotate curve. I'll freeze those transformations. We'll call this rotate handle 001. Select my last curve for scale. We'll freeze these transformations, and we'll call this scale handle 001. Alright, so let's do what we do best and nest these objects in our outliner. I middle click the feather, I drop it in scale, I click scale, drop it in rotate, rotate into translate. I select my whole rig, translate handle right here. I select my translate handle and group it. And we'll call this feather rig 001. I'm just going to select my feather here, put it into my object layer so I can't select my feather. Alright. And I've realized I just forgot a few steps on my ball, but we'll do them here on my feather, and I'll go back out when the video's done and fix my ball. I'm going to lock out some of these channel layers, right? Some of these channel values. So for scale, I'm going to lock out everything but scale. For rotate, I'm going to lock out my translates. I'm going to lock out my scales. And for my translate, I'll lock out everything but translate. So now I can only move my translate curve. That's just a really good way to make sure that you're not accidentally animating translations on your rotation handle. It's just a good way to make sure you don't get confused. Alright, so that wraps it up for our rigging layer. A rigging lecture. I'm going to go ahead and make a layer for my feather. And I've got a great scene set up now for our upcoming project. And if you set it up like this, there's a good chance that you won't get confused by anything. You'll just have your layer set up. Okay, I'm animating my feather, so I'm going to make my feather visible. I've got my rig set up. I have them locked where they need to be locked. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and lock out my whole feather. Don't forget to do that, because I don't want to be able to move my feather at all, right? And I'm ready to go and start animating, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm going to have 3 separate lectures, each for the brick, ball, and feather. This has been the lecture on rigging, doing basic rigs. I mean, this is a very, very basic rig, but it's a great place to start. Alright, so that does it for this lecture. Check back, and I'll teach you how to animate these guys. Thanks.